Alright, hopefully this is working. Hopefully the sound is working. I have managed to update drivers. I got a new video card. What was that? Was that October or November? Somewhere around there. And I had all kinds of issues to troubleshoot because there's always something. And so the fact that I now don't have to check and recheck and reset all my sound audio settings in OBS now is a good thing. Maybe, let's hope I can actually start to use my good condenser mic, but I don't feel like messing with it right now. It's already almost 1:30, so I figure my family is gonna probably come home eventually if I'm still talking and totally interrupt me because I don't have a studio and I don't have like there's so many things that could be and should be better, but they're not. But oh well. Anyways, just making do with what I have at the moment. So, I'm just recording vlogs for my own purposes. I don't care if people like what I have to say or not. It's bizarre because when I've been on other people's streams, the live views go up, sometimes like incredibly high, and there's a major uptick in searches for my name, including on LinkedIn, which will constantly tell me old blogs. People will find old blogs of mine, and then those blogs will tell me, and other things. Also, my Twitter will, the views will just shoot up, and it will tell me how many, how many impressions and all these other things. And yet I'll put these video blogs onto YouTube and it will be like, oh, nobody's watching your stuff. Which is weird because I don't know if this is a new thing now, but YouTube now allows me to do A/B testing with the cover art. And yeah, so that's happening. Okay, so... Oh, I had forgotten to mention in my previous vlog the whole thing with the interaction with Jimmy Dore, because it's just, my mind is just very non-linear, and I forgot like one part of it, and I, like a year ago at this time, because this is the time where it's set in like, oh, my friend died, and also when I realized it was my friend, because I verified that he passed away, which was difficult to, like, it was like I couldn't see it. Like, it was like part of my mind was blocking it out and I couldn't see it or something. But then, like, everything kept reminding me of David. It was just so weird. And then when I realized it, I started laughing because it was, then I realized, like, a lot of the weird things were jokes. And the reason why it reminded me of him was because it was him. And I remember sitting here and I was like, you MFer, like, what the fuck? And I just started laughing for a long time. Anyway, when I was having these, I would have certain conversations with him out loud, and I was around this time, it was basically this time, there's a big holiday Pokemon event, and it's like really beautiful, like the artwork in the game is amazing, and I'm talking to him about stuff, and I had expressed, like, I don't understand why you don't like Jimmy Dore, this and that, and then I realized, because I figure things out, like, that's what I do, that's kind of what I do. I'm not to the extent, like, he was definitely fixated on, like, mysteries and puzzles and whatever, he was that kind of person. I think I analyze, it's just how I am, it's like a Virgo thing, and I have a lot of Libra in my chart. Not that that's science or anything, but like, and then I realized, because I was thinking about, like, why did he act that way? Why did he da-da-da? And then I realized it was like this jealousy thing, and when I had this epiphany, I started talking about it, and there's a certain video social media platform. I'm not going to say what it is because there is a major uptick in people going there and following me, which used to just be like I just would go on there to just put my thoughts out, because this world is so insane that I needed to do that to, like, I don't know, like, focus on my thoughts. And I felt like typing and writing was too slow, and then I preferred to do it like more stream of consciousness via verbally talking, that I felt that it was so, it was better, and I could make this connection that my read on things and the stuff I was saying made sense. And also, because I had practice too, I used to vlog a lot, which most of those I hid on my YouTube channel for various reasons. Anyway, I realized that, like, even when I had thought about these things, and I was digesting a lot of these things, and as they were going on in the world and the media and like world events and current events or whatever, that even when I was places like Boston and I would speak out loud certain things, because I said these things, it would be like, people would be like, yeah, that's so true. I was kind of thinking that too, or I was kind of wondering that too, which was kind of like the thing also with David's radio show, was that a lot of times viewers had this feeling. I know it's called like Angry Human, which sounds a certain way, but like it was like a character that he would get into. By the way, he worked in the drama department in Yale, so there's that. But when I realized that he was jealous, and then I remember I was talking about it out loud. I was talking to this certain social media platform which uses video. I'm not going to say what it is or where. And that was immediately after that, because Jimmy Dore went live very soon after that. And literally Jimmy Dore was showing clips of that movie Network, stuff about Bill Hicks, stuff about, I don't know if it was George Carlin, but there were certain things that were specifically the kinds of things that David would talk about when he was alive, especially on that radio show, and also like on Facebook, because I was very close friends with him, and he did, it was like he heard what I said, he digested what I said, he thought about it. Also, he doesn't have the limitation of linear time like I do. He can go outside of that. He also has like this transitional thing, like this transitional space, where he can also sort of experience things with me in real time as well as outside of it. And because we're oriented through the body of the human to experience time, space, and like this linearness as moment to moment, like a needle on the record groove, he is not. Like, that is how we're oriented to comprehend and understand things. It's like an orientation, whereas he does not have that, but he also has like this adjacent thing, like a gradient thing. There's varying degrees of it. He also has like his, because my connection to him here as Candace, it's like a file or like a character file. It just reminds me of like video games like a lot. And another one of these things is because like if you've ever done like OBE, out of body exploration type stuff, which was something I experienced quite a lot when I was younger, and I didn't go through this vibration thing, which I think I'm gonna need to probably do, and I have like trepidation and like, I don't know, angst or anxiety about going through. But there is like, it's kind of like in Stranger Things, there's like the upside down, which is like this parallel simultaneously existing space that's like a copy of this reality. And I've also experienced two variations of this. One is like the one that's like overlaid simultaneously with this, and then the other one is like a pocket version of it that's kind of like a almost like a cube. It's not necessarily a cube or a dome or a bubble. A lot of times for me, like I have a bubble one, and then it's kind of like cut, copy, paste, dragged and dropped over to the side. Not necessarily like there's three-dimensional side, like here's here and there's there. I don't know how else to explain it because this gets like non-linear, but I've experienced that as well. And if you've read, like William Buhlman is one, but then there's also, was it Dennett? I can't remember his whole name. He does a lot of that kind of stuff too. So a lot of these things sort of started off or kicked off around the time before Bill Martone, who was my teacher, and let me kind of pull up my channel, and let's do that. And don't play the music. So, Bill Martone was my teacher at the Art Institute of Philadelphia. I have so many like mixed and divided feelings about the Art Institute because it was like the place I really wanted to go. And I did have very good experiences, but I also had like bad experiences too. It was a mix, and like the bad was pretty bad. So I did like wow, this is actually shot up to like 175 views at this point. So I did this kind of live stream, and I streamed it on, I think it was on Twitch, and then I uploaded it here, or I multicasted it. I think I just streamed it to Twitch, and then I think I transferred it over here. And let me see if I can pull up Bill Martone Memorial. There we go. I was really disappointed. Hold on. Is there anything here? It was like because of Pebbles that I found out about it. But I had a bunch of... Oh, there's my video. Bill Martone, or should I put it as William? No, mine is probably one of the only... Here it is in LinkedIn also. Whatever. That's definitely not him. He died in... Was it 2023? What year did I post the video? I believe it was 2023. This is a year ago, which is probably when I did the memorial. So that would be 2024, but he died in, I believe it was October of 2024, and I had a lot of fondness for Bill Martone. He was my favorite teacher at the Art Institute of Philadelphia. I also really liked Philip Zutchman. He's one of those people that not everybody liked. I really liked Phil Zutchman. He was one of those people, either you really, really liked him or you just didn't. Or maybe you had like this super neutral, like you didn't care. And he would have some relationships with certain students that was long, like lifelong and ongoing, and he would tell stories. I'm talking about Phil Zutchman, who I think is probably still alive, but I can't find him. But Bill Martone was really an amazing person, and I felt... It's funny, there's some comments here. I had a connection with Bill Martone, and he had many times made plans to come up and go painting with me and whatever. It never happened here, as well as when we were in Philly. But in Philly, like, I had a lot of really good personal interactions with Bill Martone as a student to teacher, and I was like so much It's like so new agey when I was younger, and especially like in the like Y2K, early Bush era. There was this. I was listening to internet radio like through iTunes, and there was well, even before that, but even like online and in different like spiritual communities and stuff, because I was like so into it back then. It's kind of like cringe, a lot of things now, but a common thing that people would say was stuff like, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. However, like, for my life, that never happened. There was never like this one person who came along and it's like, I'm gonna mentor you and I'm gonna help you, like, put you on the path and turn you into greatness. this kind of stuff. I'm laughing now, but I'm crying inside. But so when I came across David Biedny, who is verifiably passed away, let's see if I can pull up his obituary. There it is. David Biedny was this person that I noticed, I took notice of pretty quickly early on, because I was a very new age person, and I thought like my whole big thing, and if you look at my freaking numerology, like, my life path number is 7, which is ironic because a lot of atheists and anti-theists it's also 7. He was on, obviously, the Paracast, which is right here, which is apparently up for sale. Theparacast.com. At theparacast.com. So I don't think there have been any new episodes at all to the Paracast. Because apparently, like, Gene Steinberg is deathly ill or whatever. Gene Steinberg also asserts that David called him before he died. There's a thing in the forums about it. I don't know if this is true or not, because for years he went on Twitter absolutely, like, venting about his anger and all this bad feelings towards Gene. But hey, maybe he did. And another thing with Gene Steinberg was like the Tech Night Owl, which was another podcast, which was all about like Apple computers, or as they often were called, Macs. And that's another thing, because David Biedny was like an expert in these things, like, legitimately. And I started listening to the Paracast, like, only a few episodes after it first started. I think maybe about the 4th, 5th, or 6th episode or whatever. And when I would listen to it, David was usually like the moody one, the prickly one, the one who was like the hard ass, the assertive one, this very like brooding whatever, and Gene was considered like the nice one, the polite one. So I kept listening because I felt like the content was good and the conversations were good and the topics were interesting, because the point of the Paracast was to, at the time and at its founding, was supposed to be about, like what he said, separating the signal from the noise and like applying actual skepticism as well as being open-minded, and he had very logical, like, he had a really good approach to this, almost to the level of like a lawyer, which I thought was awesome. But at first, when I was listening to, and I probably listened to, I don't know, like a month or two worth of the Paracast podcast episodes on iTunes. And because they kept bringing up the first few episodes where he talked about his really weird paranormal experiences, I thought, okay, I feel like I'm not being fair here. Maybe I should go back and just listen to these episodes because it kept coming up. And I remember thinking, like, more favorably towards Gene than David. And then and this is funny because when I actually got to meet David personally online, I had a lot of personal interactions, including like on Skype and on the phone and whatever. Anyway, that was much later. I told him this, and I went back and I listened to the first few episodes, which was like, I think it was maybe like 4 episodes that I just didn't listen to, and I listened to everything else after, because I started listening to Paracast very early on. And when I went back and I listened to it, and I listened to, like, there was one huge mass sighting in Venezuela, and then there was like another one, a weird apparition thing that happened with another person in Florida. And I went back and I listened to all of these, and when I listened to this, I went from, like, I think probably like very new agey, like, everything is love and light, let's all get along, blah, blah. So cringy. But, like, when I listened to that, I totally understood why he was the way he was on the podcast, why his stances were specific ways. And then after I listened to all these things, it then clicked, and I understood why he was the way he was. And also I understood more and more, like, who this person actually was. At the time, he had like a Wikipedia page, and there were people who actively would sabotage it for stupid bullying asshole reasons. At some point, it was so bad they had to just take it down. But yeah, I don't even think that Wikipedia page exists at all anymore. Yeah, but I was so impressed by the work he did, because he was both a person who had verifiable experiences with witnesses, and he was very diligent about this. And then he could explain things in very detailed ways, and this was the thing I had already been interested about, because when I was younger, I had just weird experiences. And I think if you've had weird experiences, strange experiences, or paranormal or whatever, what do you do with that? And there were different kinds of personalities and books and whatever, self-professed authorities on, because you wrote a frickin' book, they would suggest certain things. And then there were other podcasts as well, and internet radio. And they would say, well, if you've had this strange experience, like, write down how you felt, who you were with, the time of day, and all these certain kinds of things. And that's what I did. The first time I had a weird experience of a UFO, I did write it down, although when I found that journal entry, I was mad because I was disappointed in myself that it wasn't as detailed as I thought it should be. That pissed me off. But I drew like a little doodle of it, and that was like a whole weird experience. And then there was another experience I had the following year. So it was 98 and 99. And I didn't write that down at all, which I'm very disappointed in myself for. That is so weird. And this is another weird thing, like, these weird interactions with whatever can, like, mess with your memory or make you, like, completely forget it. I have this feeling like in the Men in Black movie with, like, Will Smith, they have this thing in the movie where they blink you with this light and it like voids your memory or something, or hypnotizes you, whatever. And I at times kind of feel like I've been like blinked out like way too many times, and it's bad. But there are things that I've written in my journals that I have found recently that I don't remember, but it's written very and in detail, or it makes reference to things that I don't remember at all, or I'll remember it a different way, but I've written it and I've dated it and I've written details about these certain things. And that's weird. I've also had like weird, like John Keel weird kinds of experiences. So anyway, back to like Bill Martone. When Bill Martone died, a lot of times when, for whatever reason, like when human beings pass away, like I usually don't really get affected that hard unless I'm like watching a movie or something. But when if a pet dies, I'm like a wreck, and like an emotional wreck, and I want to die, or like it's just so painful. Or like I've even like had a roadkill incident, and I was just like totally just beside myself with grief over it and guilt and whatever. Or there was various, which is also ironic because I've also hunted. That's another thing. I've done hunting things, which I did not cry because it was like a total different situation or whatever. But when Bill Martone died, kind of interesting because it was like the year of the dragon, and I didn't know he had passed yet until I think it was Pebbles, or probably Pebbles, and then I was interacting with Hope also, my friend Hope, and I had all these like weird things that were going on, and so the weird things happening, I thought, oh, that's Bill. Bill is like haunting me or whatever, and I just thought it was like, I don't know, funny or cute, or I don't know. I'm like, oh, isn't that cute? Like, oh, isn't that funny? This was one of the books that fell off of my shelf over there. I was in the middle of texting Hope about stuff, and it like just shot out of the shelf. I don't even remember even that I had this book. I remember buying it though. And it was the year of the dragon, and then I had a lot of just weird stuff. And when Bill died, it was one of those experiences because I really wanted to go see him, but I couldn't get there, and I had been down in Delaware with my parents, and I couldn't go to see him. It was just so many things that happened, I just couldn't go, and I felt bad. It wasn't like I didn't care, because I cared. Hello. And I did feel bad, and I had a lot of these weird dreams. I also had a dream on my birthday that was very real. That's a long experience, and it had involved music, and I was really perplexed. One of these very realistic weird dreams definitely depicted Bill Martone, and another person was Jeff Otto, who was a kind of administrator, coordinator, or whatever, from Art Institute in the computer animation major, which had also been called other things over the years. I have a degree in computer animation. And I'm so distracted now because my cat is being adorable. Anyway, so I kept experiencing these weird like things, and these things. Another thing was my friend Lexi, who is Pebble's mom, whom I had a lot of love for in a big way also. She was in like kind of like hospice situation, so I knew she was passing, and I had already been like studying certain things. I'm always like reassessing, testing, and countering, questioning a lot of things. And I'm never fully set in a full conclusion unless I feel it's very conclusive. I have a tendency, because that's philosophy, that's logic. And I was doing various kinds of like experiments where I was, especially because of like reincarnation soul trap stuff, when you get into things like the life review type thing. And one thing that comes up a lot in the data is when people go through their life review and there's no getting out of it, like it's gonna happen. I had one also, like when I had my NDE, but I can't remember it. You experience not only yourself, again, because it's recorded, but you experience other person's point of view. Also, you can experience, like, if you cause good or bad, positive, negative experiences that are kind of rippled out into other people. And because of this, like, there were many instances, so many instances where people were recounting their life review stuff in NDEs, near-death experiences, that they were talking about, like, they had actually experienced the thoughts of other people. And also this experience of, like, transmitting and receiving thoughts kind of thing. So I was experimenting with this kind of idea in various ways, including sending thoughts and messages to my future self and my past self. If I went through a bad situation, I could tell my past self something like, oh, it's not that bad, or hey, watch out for this thing. And even though I, in the timeline, had already gone through it, because I understood, like, this weird, like, diverting, branching, quantum aspect of reality and time, space, or whatever, I was experimenting with this kind of thing, like, a lot. And then I had so many instances where I had gone through something bad, and I would send the thoughts to my past self, as well as my future self. And I had received those messages, even for, like, small things. And that was super interesting. But this was going on a lot. So because Lexi was, I had a feeling that Lexi was passing, that she was going to pass. And she had a stroke, I think. And so I would go to certain places, and in my mind I would, like, take a snapshot of it, like, especially in the autumn, and then I would just send this to the person, and I was like, okay, at the moment of your natural death, like, I would like you to experience this with me. And I did this many times, and so one of them I sent it to was Lexi, another one was Bill, and then there were certain other people, like my parents, who are still alive, and just various other people that I love and care about, or including people that won't talk to me, which included, at the time, David. And I would because every day I would go out, and I was trying to hit level 50. I was playing so hardcore. I was also incredibly anemic, incredibly ill, and I was actually dying. I just didn't understand that there was a whole medical intervention. I got forced to go into surgery at the beginning of January in 2024. No, in the beginning of February, which is like days after David passed away. And because I was still, like, moody about David, I still cared about this person, and so I would send, like, emails, like, thoughts to my friend. I'd be like, okay, at the moment of natural death, I want you to come and experience, like, this beautiful place I'm in, like, the foliage is beautiful, or the snow here is beautiful, or whatever it was, or the twilight, the way the sky looks right now is, like, really beautiful. And I would do this. I would even do this with, like, Bill Martone, including after he died, And a lot of times I just felt like I was, like, Bill was with me. And there were lots of things that Bill was doing that would, like, remind me of certain things. Or, like, it seemed like he was getting, like, like he wanted my attention. Or, like, hey, notice this. Hey, notice that. And so it was like this kind of, like, almost like breadcrumbs, like one thing leads to another thing and then to another thing. But then, like, because I feel like with a lot of, like, new age type persons or whatever, and this is the thing with human beings, is like people think they know everything. They know. They're so sure, blah blah blah. And the truth is, I feel like we don't really know that much. And this is kind of the thing with, being a human being in a human body. And there is this dogmatic view, which I view as like a late 20th century, early 21st century, like, dogmatic view of, well, you have these specific amount of days and years and whatever, and then you're gonna be reincarnated, because human beings only see things in this linear, time-locked view. And because I was aware of that, I was more inclined to think that as well. Like, I thought, oh, Bill is hanging around me, but, he'll eventually, like, move on or something. Because this is the dogma that people think they know, but there's no way to prove, because it's not like you can just pull up a reference and go, oh, how many exact microseconds and years and whatever, and reincarnation and blah blah blah, with all my other attached dogma things from my specific cultural bias, according to my bias system, which is better than everyone else's because I said so, because I'm so sure, because I just like it. What is the exact blah blah blah? And I've heard everything from, like, people who need to, like, move on, and this is like a bad thing, and people imposing their value systems and judgments because some celebrity, like, decades ago, wrote a book and it got published and it was on the bestseller list, and there was, like, ad campaigns and media circuits, and therefore it's true because of that, as though that's how, truth works, because that's not how truth works. I had I kept experiencing, I was experiencing the stuff with Bill, but then I was noticing things that, like, was kind of, for me, seemed like out of character for Bill, and then I was having, like, these weird dreams, and I even had, like, this very weird, like, obviously Back to the Future kind of a dream, like, when Marty McFly went to the past with his parents, and then he pretended to be, like, Darth Vader and put, like, headphones on his dad's teenage body and blasted rock and roll into his head, and then told him he had to take Lorraine, which was his mom, to the undersea dance or something. And I had this dream. It's very much like that. And even when I woke up, I was like, this reminds me, because it was like this rock and roll music was blasted into my head, into my mind, and I was shown all these, like, images, all these, like, symbolisms, and I was supposed to pay attention to. I saw all this stuff, and it was this very, like, 90s grunge alternative rock music, which is just not my thing, right? And I'm like, what the? Also, like, I wish I knew what band that was. I don't. And it's also weird because when I woke up, I thought, wow, this is weird. This kind of reminds me of David, like, a lot. At the time, his body was still technically alive. And this is why I say, like, if you're locked into the view of like time, space as a bias, these things won't make sense from that standpoint, which is why I had to learn about things like retrocausality, and these things came to me and was like, hey, this concept is it decided of its own volition that you need to learn it. And it would just constantly come up. At least that's how it felt like to me. And then I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to learn this. And it was just over and over. There were these things that came up. There were podcasts, there were live streams, there were topics of people who weren't even into that kind of a thing, and then the topic would come up. This kind of thing happened a lot. And then I remember I had this dream I had because there was a Pokemon Go Fest on my birthday. And this was like after or before, somewhere around the time when Bill Martone died, or after. And this dream had this, it was so real. My dreams are all pretty much always in full color, like very colorful. But this specific dream had a black and white tone grayscale to it, like an old film. But it was so real, and it was a very long thing. And then somebody had blasted, because there was also like this, there was definitely like a female type presence or whatever there, very like nature goddess vibe. And then there were these trees, and these trees were like very alive in like a different kind of way than like usually you think of a plant as being alive. Like they moved and they were like animated, and it was very realistic, and they had like a consciousness to them. And it was like these sakura trees, and I was in this place that was like where I grew up in New Jersey, but when I went into this area, it just kept expanding and expanding, and there was like this hidden valley and all these like hills and mountains, and it was like this other world like opened up, and I was there, and I was interacting with these plants that were like alive in a way that like that you can't experience here, right? And then I had this experience of this music in my head, and it was by the Carpenters, and it was because the 70s is like a thing with this, and it was Close to You, and I heard every freaking word, every note exactly perfect, and I hadn't listened to that song in like years, and it was like directly like hooked into my head, into my mind, and I had this very clear experience of this person like expressing this love to me, and I was so like moved by this. I felt really nice, really good. And so at first I thought that it was like Bill Martone because Bill Martone died. But then like I would still think about this, and I was like, that doesn't make sense, because like my relationship with Bill Martone was like not like that. Like, why would Bill Martone go through all the trouble to like do that? Because this was like a huge effort. Like, whoever did this, I don't remember thinking like, who died? This doesn't make any sense. And I had a lot of these. My cat is over here because I'm thinking about David. Basically, at some point, because all these things kept happening, and they kept reminding me very strongly of David, that I now understand it, because I wrote so many of these things down, as a communication from my friend. And that made a lot more sense from him, this expression of this like very strong expression of love towards me. And also having interactions with, I would have dreams and there was this guy there, and he would kind of like be either invisible, or I could kind of see him and perceive him but not, or he'd just kind of like be there with me as like other events were going on in a dream sequence. But then like because I think once he realized like what would catch my attention and what I would pay attention to or what I would remember and why, he he was experimenting with that. He built all these like structures, non-physical structure, non-three-dimensional structure, time space, molecular time space, none of that. It's like this other adjacent existence, and he built these structures, and I oftentimes could perceive them. I could perceive things as like a control room. A lot of times I had these experiences that were heavily reminding me of like the danger room in X-Men, big time, as well as like the holodeck in Star Trek The Next Generation. And I saw these like structure things, and I also feel like he oftentimes could still get frustrated, and he would vent it at me. But he also would ask me, like, are you sure you're okay with this? And I was like, yeah. And we had a lot of this, like, banter, but I could never remember, like, who I was talking to or why. It's as if, like, part of it was part of the test, like, to see, like, if I could figure it out or what I could figure out and how much I could remember, like, these, like, fidelity tests and things like that. And also the things that was coming up in my daily life, had a strong, intense, like, intent to it and, like, meaning. And there's certain things that were catching my attention. And, like, at the time when Bill Martone passed, one of the things that really grabbed my attention was like ancient Greek everything. Ancient Greek, and maybe like ancient Egypt, but like Alexandria, but especially like ancient Greek everything. And one of the things that came up was stuff like Orpheus, Morpheus, Eurydice, and like there's this whole story of Orpheus going to the underworld to meet up with his, I don't know, his fiance or whatever, who was a nymph, or what was it, a dryad, and a nature dryad. And I had a lot of this kind of weird symbolic stuff come up a lot. And Orpheus was like this demigod of music, and I was constantly researching and looking into just so many references for this, and I was so into it. And it was, I kept thinking like, oh, like, is this like Bill Martone like doing this? And so I thought it was Bill, but then like there were just so many of these things that just kept reminding me of David. And like the music reference. And then I found out some details about the cult of Orpheus and the origins of how a lot of it just sort of got repurposed into what eventually became the Catholic Church, including the dark sides. And I was not happy about that. And I was like, ew, gross. I don't like this anymore. And so in a huff I was like, screw this. This is bad. I don't like this. And we, as a tendency today, even in modern fairy tales, whitewash so many things which were originally just horrible. Like there's so many kinds of stories, fairy tales, myths, legends that are absolutely horrible, but we've whitewashed them for, you know, modern audiences. And there are channels on YouTube that, I think there's one that's called The Messed Up Origins of Fairy Tales or whatever it is, and that's pretty interesting. And then here we go with the literature and research stuff. So yeah, I had a lot of this kind of like dragons stuff coming up in my art, like an inspiration for my art. And like let me cut. So I was doing like I mentioned before, I was experimenting with like AI music, like, you know, with my story and so on. And this is no activity. That's weird. It's empty. Okay, well, whatever. And am I not logged in? I don't know what happened. That is weird. It says I have 50 credits. I can't access my profile? Is that my... whatever, it's not loading. It's not loading. So I was, I don't know, recently getting more into my original art, original content, concepts and stuff, and I still need to read my friend's book, which I just have not got to. And it's interesting how, like, it was like the year of the dragon and all this like dragon stuff, and like dragons are like a thing with me, especially when I was in college. And it's back again. Big time. So that's been interesting. Like I said, I still have very like mixed feelings about AI. I definitely do. I have different like concept ideas or whatever, and I have like meditated on it. Is this even gonna work? What is going on? What is even going on? Actually, let me... or was that? Whatever. 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 Would you like to work? Would you like to work? Yeah, so there's there's my unethical, evil music that I worked on and experimented with horrible AI slop cover photos. And why did you make... why is it a pink dragon? Oh my god. Anyway, I anyway, there's a lot of stuff that David does. I have just been learning a lot. He sends stuff my way. He seems to know what I like and what I would respond well to. It's been like really interesting. Oh yeah, here's this blog. And the reason I know about this was because of him when he was alive. This is like forever ago. This lady, Sarah Kernokan, I don't know. She had a lot of these very interesting and very detailed, very prolonged interactions with her grandfather, who had a very big personality. And I remember reading some of these things, and I believe she worked in like the film industry, maybe even like, was it music? Yeah, music. She did music. She talked about like her father. They talked about all kinds of stuff. And her and her grandfather had disagreements, and she was one of these persons who would talk about how, like, just because somebody is dead or spirit or passed on and you have sainted them or turned them into this like god-like figure or whatever, or this super hallowed being, just because they passed away. Whereas her grandfather, who passed away, who did do things to help her and whatever, he would also get bossy, and he would also like try and push her around. And when she realized, like, oh, I don't have to do what you tell me, and she would like push back, she had to like assert her like boundaries. But he also would, there's so many instances where he had set up situations for her, like for like music production, and just some of the stories in here are just so mind-blowingly like wow, and they're weird. And I mean, like, there was even like, if I don't remember what year it was, there was this one story I remember where like, I think it was either like a psychic or a fortune teller that was like very like, I don't know, famous or whatever, gave her a reading. And there was like so many of these very specific details in the reading that sounded like batshit crazy. And we're talking like people who were movie stars and celebrities at the time. And these predictions of, oh, you're gonna have this person as like your soulmate, and then these other things are gonna happen, and you know, whatever. And so because she had this reading, at first she's like, that's insane, like what the hell. And then in her working life, literally those people who were named and foretold in this like prophecy like situation actually started to appear. And the things that the lady predicted, which starting to like kind of happen in certain ways. And she was like, oh crap, I don't want to break up this celebrity couple's marriage. And she would like go and like avoid certain things, and the whole thing like bothered her so much. But the lady made it sound, I think it was the fortune teller made it sound like it was unavoidable, it was fate, it was gonna happen, and da da da, and you couldn't, whatever. But then, like, it was uncanny the amount of details of things that actually occurred in her life, but she never broke up that person's marriage, never married that person, and like, I don't even think they had a relationship, like a romantic relationship or anything. And the things that was foretold that was supposed to happen, those circumstances came about, but then they did not go the way the lady prophesized. And I remember David posting one of these blog articles, and I remember sitting here reading it, and the fact that he was super interested in it meant to me it must be interesting. And I remember reading it, and I'm like, what the heck is this? Yeah, so that was like one of those things. That's also kind of, I think, part of the reason why I know, like, I don't have to do what some non-physical being says or wants me to do or think if I don't want to. However, my friend has definitely found ways to steer me, steer other people, and he's also messed up and made mistakes too, and that can happen. Also, there are mention in this where her grandfather, like, caused power outs and popped light bulbs and shattered glass and stuff like that. So this to me suggests that people, because a lot of people will think like, oh, you're being a bad person and you're causing some kind of horrible attachment with this person, and you're selfish, and you're gonna cause some bad juju karma thing, and you need to kick this person out and send them away and whatever. Well, this lady never really kicked her grandfather away. Although there was times where she would get mad at him and tell him to like give her some space and leave her alone, and that happened. However, like in my experience with my friend, I wouldn't say there was anything bad happening. There's nothing negative happening. That's maybe subjective because some people, if I explain certain stuff, they would be like, "That's horrible," and for me, it really wasn't. Like he had like pranked me, and that was not fun at the time, but it is funny. A lot of it's just hilarious, and I'm not scared at all. There are things that that can shock me. It's definitely like a shock, and I can experience. And so there's that. Let me see if I can I run? Is Blender gonna run? I don't know if this is gonna run, if it's gonna like force an update. Are you gonna force an update on me? Let's see, maybe. Let me run. Oh, here we go. So, I don't want to like put people down or make people feel like they're stupid or ignorant, or although that's one of those things that, like, there are no derogatory words for Caucasian people, but if you point out that a person is ignorant and correctly used it by the actual definition, they freak out as though you had called them the N-word. That is definitely a thing. Let's see if I can remember how to use this. Oh, yeah. There we go. So, I have a tendency to kind of comprehend these things from the perspective of having studied like 3D software, 3D animation software, and CGI, same freaking thing. Because these things are based on like geometry and physics, and I figured I'd just kind of bring that up. There's so many times where I've like recommended certain things to people, and do you think they would bother to do any of it? They wouldn't. They would not. I'm like not even that good at 3D. Like I'm objectively bad. The things that I mostly use 3D for are stuff like camera lighting, especially in After Effects, extrude, and particle systems, which is, I love particle systems. Like I really like it a lot. I don't think I'm that great though. I can't remember how to use this. It's like a whole, it's not like three, actually, do I have 3D Studio Max? I thought I did. I don't see it here though. Or is it Autodesk? I haven't done these things in a while. AutoCAD? I don't think I have AutoCAD. Whatever. I think I might have to come up with some ways to explain this stuff using 3D software eventually. I feel like a lot of the things that I'm learning and understanding, like there are no vocabulary for this. Really? Okay. Anyway, and I have to come up with my own, like, I feel like this concept of like just the word dream is not enough. I really like Heather's stuff, although she has like her own sort of lexicon for, you know, like terms, words, whatever, vocabulary in different definitions than I would use. And I didn't want to get into like semantics or whatever with that with her, because I felt like this was kind of like more subjective than objective. And when it comes to like philosophy and philosophers, like I took this seminar class at UMass Boston, and we had to read like different like treatises and manifestos and stuff for various like approaches to how to organize society. I can't remember the exact names of them at the moment. And each one of these, I mean, it's like really difficult reads, because each one had their own personal preference about how they wrote, like their writing style, their preference for words, terms, lexicon, syntax. And I mean, it was everything from like egalitarianism to communism to like all kinds of this stuff. And because people in certain communities, especially like quote unquote spiritual communities, quote unquote new age communities, quote unquote paranormal communities, quote unquote fringe communities, and other kinds of alternative counterculture communities, they think they know things when it's only like a certain set of how they're looking at stuff, and they're unaware of that there are other ideas and there are other things out there. I think you also need to understand bad ideas too. That might sound counterintuitive, but I think it's important to understand bad ideas and why they're bad versus other ideas. And I feel like there are lots of options and stuff out there. Another thing that I have a tendency to defer to is certain kinds of theory. What happened to my OBS? There it is. One of them is set theory, which I feel is highly cogent and highly important, especially if you're studying like simulation theory. I feel like it behooves you to understand set theory, like the origin of it, why it exists. And then the other one is systems theory. And I don't think you can just watch one or two little, nutshell videos and then think you understand these things. I've mentioned this to several personalities in like soul reincarnation, soul trap, whatever, circles, whatever. And whatever, like they have their own views or biases or whatever. And I feel like this is like important. It's something that we should know, we should learn, and they're not talking about it. There was also like, I probably should have taken notes. What was it? The Game of Life program. Was it Conway's Game of Life? This was one of these things that I was looking for years, and it's funny because I asked David to help me. There's a lot to explain about how this works. It came from this very old. So there was pixel-based versions of theories on. Okay, so it was this old. It was like centuries ago. Okay, so this is the Game of Life stuff. There's certain like rules and stuff. And it reminds me of how biology works, how like and molecules and how molecular biology, life, what like, it's funny, I'll listen to people like highfalutin, you know, philosophers from Oxford, and they'll say like, I'm not worthy enough to take on the question of what is the meaning of life and blah blah blah. But to me, when you're talking about life regarding like biology and this continuation like in the timeline of stuff, I would say it's Conway's Game of Life, which was based on, it was this, I don't know, it was a mathematician. It was like several centuries ago. And this other guy's work, and he applied it to computing in the 20th century. And is it even mentioned here? I can't remember. I can't find it. There's so much here. I would say this is the stuff you need to like look into. This is stuff you're not aware of and is not taught to you. Because they think you're too stupid and they don't want you to even, they or whoever's in charge, would also like you to stay stupid and ignorant. And I'm trying to see if I can find that guy. It was like a, was it a German guy or a French guy? It was like a very long time ago. This guy came up with the concept. I thought it was like dinner plates or tea saucers or something like that, and then he'd put it in these grids, and then based on certain things you could move, you could replicate, you could do these, you know, whatever. And then they applied this technique to the pixels in computing simulations, like as you can see here. So this is this one that you can't see my fingers. So this one and this one is interacting with it, and because based on how the rules is, it's now replicating and making like an offspring or growing. And this is kind of like the principle of like how biology is working, because biology is using molecules, it's using like carbon, oxygen, water, and whatever other elements. And this could also get into like abiogenesis theory, which is not evolution, it's a whole different theory than evolution, etc. Assuming that's even like what happened or whatever. But I feel like these are things worthy of learning and paying attention to. Anyways, I thought about like maybe doodling some diagrams of stuff, but like right now I'm like highly distracted because the peanut gallery over there and noisiness. I just wanted to kind of like put my thoughts out there, and so that's it. Anyway, the end.